Have you ever unfriended someone just because of a single opinion they posted online? Maybe it was political. Maybe it was about parenting or religion or even something as simple as food. At first glance it seems harmless. Just a click. One less voice in your feed. But that tiny action reveals something much deeper, something far more dangerous. We're not just filtering content anymore. We're filtering people. And slowly, without even realizing it, we're forgetting how to talk to each other. Now, let me ask you this. How many people do you avoid in real life simply because you can't stand talking to them? It's awkward, it's draining, and sometimes it's downright infuriating. But it didn't always used to be this way. There was a time when people could disagree and still remain in conversation. But lately something's changed. You can feel it. Conversations feel more like battlegrounds than bridges. Even the safest topics, weather, health, weekend plans, now seem to come with a dozen tripwires. This isn't just a feeling. It's a fact. A Pew Research study surveyed over 10,000 adults in the United States and found that we are more politically and socially divided now than at any point in recent history. People aren't just disagreeing, they're isolating. We're choosing where to live, who to marry, and even who to befriend based on the things we already believe. And if someone doesn't match that, we cut them out. Politely. Silently. Completely. We've lost the balance between speaking and listening. That rhythm that used to make conversation natural, even enjoyable, that's gone. And if you think this is all just the result of a few bad actors or a toxic news cycle, think again. The truth is, a lot of the blame lies in our own hands, literally. Smartphones have made it easier than ever to communicate, but in doing so, they've made real connection harder than ever. According to Pew, about a third of American teens send more than 100 texts a day. Think about that. That's not communication. That's transmission. The art of meaningful conversation is being replaced by the efficiency of convenience. There's a brilliant article from The Atlantic, written by a high school teacher named Paul Barnwell. He gave his students a simple assignment: speak on a topic without using any notes. Just talk. And what he found stunned him. He said, "I came to realize that conversational competence might be the single most overlooked skill we fail to teach." These kids spent hours every day interacting through screens, but when asked to engage face-to-face, they froze. They stumbled. They couldn't do it. And here's the real kicker. This isn't just about kids. Adults are struggling just as much. We spend so much time crafting the perfect comment, the sharpest tweet, or the most viral story, that we've forgotten how to sit across from another human being and just talk. No filters. No edits. No emojis. Just talk. And more importantly, listen. Look, I make a living talking to people. I've interviewed Nobel Prize winners, truck drivers, billionaires, kindergarten teachers, heads of state, and plumbers. Some of them I liked. Some of them I didn't. Some of them I disagreed with so strongly, it took everything in me to keep the conversation going. But I did. And here's the thing, I always walked away having learned something. That's the power of a real conversation. You can walk in one person and walk out changed. So today I want to help you rediscover that power. I want to teach you how to talk again. Not small talk. Not forced pleasantries. Real talk. Conversations that make you think, that challenge your beliefs, that help you grow. And just as importantly, conversations that don't waste your time, bore you to death, or end in someone storming off. Chances are, you've already heard 100 tips about how to be a good conversationalist. Things like, make eye contact. Nod and smile. Come prepared with interesting topics. Repeat what they just said to show you're listening. And look, I get it. Those tips might sound helpful. But I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Forget them. All of them. They're garbage. No one wants to have a conversation with a robot who's running through a checklist. People don't want to be analyzed. They want to be heard. And if you are actually paying attention, genuinely interested, guess what? You don't need to fake it. The techniques I use as a professional interviewer aren't tricks. They're just skills. Skills that anyone can learn and apply in everyday life. And when you do, you'll see the difference. You'll stop having shallow, exhausting exchanges and start having real conversations. Conversations that energize you, inspire you, and maybe even change your life. Now, this isn't about being nice or polite or winning debates. This is about connection. It's about the most human thing we do, communicate. And if we can learn to do that better, even just a little bit better, we'll all be better off for it. So let's spend the next few minutes breaking this down. I'll give you 10 simple, practical rules, no fluff, no theory, that will make you a better talker and an even better listener. And trust me, even if you only take one of these and apply it, your conversations will instantly improve. But before we dive in, do me a favor. If you want to have better conversations, if you want to be the kind of person people actually want to talk to, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is all about helping you communicate with confidence, with clarity, and with purpose. So go ahead, click subscribe, and let's talk. Ready? Let's begin. Let's start with something simple. Rule number 1, don't multitask. Now, I'm not just talking about putting your phone down while someone is speaking, although, yes, definitely put your phone down. I'm talking about being fully present. Mentally, emotionally, physically. If you're in a conversation but half of your brain is thinking about the email you forgot to send, or the argument you had with your boss, or what you're going to eat for dinner, you're not really in the conversation. Let me be clear, your body can't fake presence. People notice. Maybe not consciously, but they feel it. They know when you're giving them 60% attention, and guess what? They'll return the favor. And suddenly you've got two people talking at each other, not with each other. That's how you end up with shallow, surface-level conversations that are forgotten the second they end. If you don't want to be in the conversation, don't be. Excuse yourself. Step away. That's perfectly okay. But what's not okay is hovering in this gray zone, half listening, half zoning out. That's not communication. That's noise. We live in a culture that celebrates multitasking. You've probably bragged about it yourself. Doing 3 things at once, always on the move, always plugged in. But let me ask you something. Has that actually made your conversations better? Or just more distracted? Being present doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean you have to have the right words or know exactly what to say. It just means you're there, fully, listening, engaged. And that presence? That's rare. That's powerful. People notice when they're truly being heard. It changes the dynamic immediately. And this brings us to rule number 2, don't pontificate. Let me put it this way. If you want to state your opinions with zero room for feedback, rebuttal, or disagreement, go. We want to connect, but we end up shifting the focus from them to us. Here's the truth, it's never the same. Their experience is theirs. Your experience is yours. Even if the situations sound identical, the emotions, the context, the impact, they're all different. When someone's opening up to you, they're not asking for a matching story. They're asking to be heard. Let me be blunt. This moment is not about you. It's not your spotlight. It's not your therapy session. It's a chance to hold space for someone else. To let them be seen. To let them breathe. You don't need to prove that you understand by offering your own example. You prove you understand by listening without hijacking the story. By staying with them in their moment. Stephen Hawking was once asked what his IQ was. He replied, I have no idea. People who boast about their IQs are losers. Now think about that. One of the most brilliant minds in history refused to make conversations about himself. Maybe there's something we can learn from that. Because here's the irony, the less you make conversations about you, the more people will actually connect with you. The more they'll trust you. The more they'll want to talk to you again. Let's recap this section. Go with the flow. Don't cling to your own thoughts. Let them pass. Stay present with what's being said. If you don't know, say so. Honesty builds trust. Pretending destroys it. Don't compare your experience. Listening is not about matching. It's about witnessing. These aren't tricks. They're not tactics to manipulate people into liking you. They're habits, mindsets, and the more you practice them, the more natural they become. In the next section, we'll dig into the unconscious habits that derail our conversations. Things like repetition, over-explaining, and drowning people in details they didn't ask for. You might be surprised how often you do it. So far, we've talked about presence, humility, and the art of truly listening. But even when we manage to do all that, when we're engaged, open, and responsive, we still fall into traps. Subtle ones. Habits so ingrained we don't even notice them. Yet they quietly suck the life out of a conversation. Let's talk about rule number 7. Don't repeat yourself. Now you might think, I don't do that. But you probably do. We all do. Especially in situations where we feel uncertain or want to make sure our point is heard. We say something, then say it again slightly differently, and then again with just a little more emphasis. It's common in workplace conversations. It's very common with kids. And it's almost always counterproductive. Here's why. Repetition isn't emphasis, it's condescension. When you repeat yourself, you're silently telling the other person, you didn't get it the first time, so let me try again. Whether you realize it or not, you're talking down. And unless you're giving instructions on how to defuse a bomb or assemble IKEA furniture, stop. Great conversations aren't lectures. They're not PowerPoint presentations. They're exchanges. If you find yourself repeating a point over and over, it's usually because you're not being heard. And that's a signal to pause, not push harder. Sometimes people don't respond the way we want, so we repeat ourselves thinking they didn't understand. But often we didn't express ourselves clearly in the first place. Or maybe they did understand, they just don't agree. Either way, hammering the same point over and over won't fix it. Say it once, clearly, simply, directly. Then move on. Give the other person space to respond, react, or even disagree. That's what real conversation requires. Which brings us to rule number 8, stay out of the weeds. This one's big. People think details make them sound informed. But in conversation, too many details are a death sentence. Let me explain. When you're telling a story and you start loading it with exact dates, the names of people no one knows, the color of the carpet, the time of day, and the temperature outside, you're not adding value. You're building a maze. People don't care about the precise year something happened unless it matters to the point. They don't need to know your cousin's coworker's last name. What they want is the core, the heart of the story. The why. Look, the human brain is wired for narrative, not data dumps. So when you start wandering into the weeds, bogging your listener down with unnecessary specifics, you're not showing how smart you are. You're losing them. And this is especially dangerous when you're trying to connect emotionally. If someone is telling you about a hard time or sharing something personal and your response is, "That reminds me of the time in 2016, no wait, maybe it was 2015 when my friend Janet, no, her name was Jane, well anyway," you've already lost the thread. And worse, you've taken the spotlight off them and put it on your own memory reel. Now there's a balance here. You don't need to strip your stories of all color. But you do need to ask yourself, is this detail helping the story, or just showing off my recall? If you're not sure, leave it out. This leads naturally into rule number 9. Listen. Like really listen. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth drilling deeper. Listening is not just the pause between your own sentences. It's not waiting for your turn. It's not performance. True listening is active. It's mental, emotional, and even physical. It's nodding because you get it, not because you were taught to nod. It's asking follow-up questions that flow from what the other person just said, not from your pre-planned script. It's letting go of the urge to correct, advise, or redirect. Real listening means letting the other person change you. That's the test. If you finish a conversation and haven't been changed, even a little, you probably weren't listening. You were just waiting. Stephen Covey put it best. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. That quote stings because it's true. Think back on your last few conversations. Were you really trying to understand? Or were you mentally lining up your next sentence? Now imagine what it would be like to talk to someone who actually listens. Who's fully present, curious, and engaged. That person is a magnet. People are drawn to them, not because they say the smartest things but because they care enough to hear you out. And that's what great conversation does. It makes people feel heard, valued, respected. Let's recap the 3 big traps from this section. Don't repeat yourself. Once is enough. Say it clearly and move forward. Stay out of the weeds. Focus on the heart of the story, not the trivia. Listen to understand, not to reply. Let the conversation shape you. When you avoid these traps, everything changes. Your conversations become lighter, smarter, more connected. You stop draining people and start energizing them. And in a world where most people are desperate to be heard, that's a rare and powerful gift. In the next section, we'll tackle the final, and perhaps most important rule. One that ties everything together. One that, if practiced consistently, can transform not just your conversations, but your relationships, your career, and your life. We've come a long way already. You've heard about presence, humility, curiosity, clarity, and deep listening. But there's one final rule that wraps them all together. One that write a blog. Conversations are not monologues. They're not speeches. And they're definitely not one-sided. You've seen it happen. Someone launches into a rant. They talk for 5 minutes straight. No questions. No pauses. No interest in your input. Just a verbal steamroll. At some point, you stop listening. Not because you're rude, but because there's no space for you in that conversation. You've been turned into an audience, not a participant. That's what happens when you go in with a fixed mindset. When you believe that your opinion is the right one, and that everyone else is just waiting for their turn to be enlightened by your brilliance. You're not trying to connect, you're trying to win. And if that's your goal, trust me, the conversation is already dead. The key is to enter every conversation with the assumption that you have something to learn. Yes, even from people you disagree with. especially from them. Because real dialogue isn't about converting people to your side. It's about understanding where they're coming from, even if you never agree. Dr. M. Scott Peck, a renowned psychiatrist, once said that real listening requires you to empty yourself. That means letting go of your agenda, your script, your desire to control the outcome. It means sitting in the discomfort of not knowing how the conversation will go, and being okay with that. Because when you really listen, something shifts. The other person softens. They stop defending. They start sharing. And suddenly, you're not opponents, you're collaborators. You've probably heard of Bill Nye, the science guy. He once said, "Everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't." I live by that. I tell people this all the time, everyone is an expert in something. You just have to ask the right questions. And that leads us to rule number 3, use open-ended questions. This one's critical. If you want to have better conversations, you need to stop asking questions that can be answered with yes or no. You need to invite people to share, not just respond. Think like a journalist. Ask questions that begin with who, what, when, where, why, or how. These are the magic keys that unlock real stories. Instead of asking, "Were you scared?" ask, "How did you feel in that moment?" See the difference? One leads to a closed door. The other opens it wide. Because here's the truth, most people don't naturally spill their thoughts. They need a little nudge. They need a safe space. And the best way to create that space is by asking thoughtful, open-ended questions, and then shutting up and letting them talk. Don't interrupt. Don't hijack the conversation with your own story. Just listen. And as they speak, fight the urge to prepare your next comment. Let your mind stay with them, not with what you're going to say next. Trust me, they'll feel the difference. We're so conditioned to treat conversations like ping-pong matches. You serve, they return, you counter. But the best conversations aren't games. They're dances. Fluid, responsive, intuitive. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. So let's recap. Be present. Completely. No phones. No distractions. Just you, and the other person. Don't treat conversations like speeches. Leave room for discovery, for growth, for learning. Ask better questions. Stop looking for the right answer, start looking for the real story. If you master just these 3 things, being present, being open, and being curious, you'll already be miles ahead of most people. You'll stop having dull, frustrating conversations. And you'll start having meaningful, memorable ones. In the next section, we're going even deeper. We'll talk about what not to do when your mind starts racing ahead, and how to stay grounded when the conversation starts pulling you in 10 different directions. You're sitting across from someone. They're talking. Maybe telling a story. Something interesting. Something personal. You nod, you smile, but inside your brain, you're somewhere else. You're remembering a story of your own. You're planning your response. You're waiting, itching, for your turn to speak. That brings us to rule number 4, go with the flow. Sounds simple, right? But it's not. Most of us are so focused on what we want to say next, we stop listening long before the other person finishes speaking. We cling to our own ideas. A thought pops into our head and we refuse to let it go, even if it has nothing to do with what's being said anymore. This is one of the biggest conversation killers out there. You've probably witnessed it. Someone shares a vulnerable story, and instead of responding to that, the other person lobs in a completely unrelated question or anecdote. The tone shifts. The connection breaks. And just like that, the moment is gone. You've also probably done it. We all have. We get excited. We get nervous. We want to relate. So we interrupt the natural rhythm of the conversation to inject our own thought, to make sure it doesn't slip away. But here's the thing, if the thought is really that important, it'll come back. If it doesn't, maybe it wasn't so important to begin with. There's a beautiful discipline in letting go. In trusting that what needs to be said will find its moment. When you learn to go with the flow, to stay in the current of what's being shared, you allow the conversation to become something alive. Something organic. Something neither of you planned, but both of you needed. That kind of conversation can't happen if you're clinging to your mental checklist. It requires surrender. It requires presence. It requires listening with no other agenda than understanding. Which brings us to rule number 5, if you don't know, say you don't know. Now this might seem obvious, but it's not. In fact, it's incredibly rare. People hate admitting they don't know something. We live in a culture where confidence is often valued more than accuracy. We'd rather guess than say the words "I don't know." But in conversation, pretending to know things you don't is one of the fastest ways to erode trust. People can tell. And once they sense you're bluffing, even a little, they'll start questioning everything else you say. Think about it. Who do you respect more? The person who admits when they're not sure, or the one who pretends to be an expert on every topic under the sun? Honesty builds credibility. Saying "I don't know" isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It shows humility. It shows that you value truth more than image. And most importantly, it creates space for others to share what they know. Now, you might be thinking, but I don't want to seem uninformed. Here's the truth, everyone is uninformed about something. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be honest about the answers you don't have. This rule is especially important in emotionally sensitive conversations. When someone's sharing something painful or complex, resist the urge to diagnose, fix, or explain. Just listen. And if you're not sure what to say that. It's okay. I don't know what to say, but I'm here. That's powerful. And it sets the stage for rule number 6, don't equate your experience with theirs. This one's hard. Really hard. Because most of us are trying to relate. Someone talks about losing their job, and we say, "Yeah, that happened to me once." Someone talks about a breakup, and we respond with our own heartbreak story. We mean well. If you forget everything else, can still carry you through most conversations with grace and authenticity. Rule number 10, be brief. Yes, that's simple. Be brief. Now this might sound like a contradiction. After all, we're spending hours talking about how to talk. But brevity isn't about rushing or cutting things short. It's about knowing when to stop. It's about respecting people's time, energy, and attention. Think of it this way, conversation is like seasoning. A little goes a long way. Too much ruins the dish. You've been there. You ask someone a simple question and they launch into a 10-minute answer that spirals through irrelevant backstories, tangents, and self-justifications. You smile, you nod, but inside, you're begging for an exit. That's not connection. That's captivity. And the thing is, they're probably not doing it on purpose. Most people ramble because they're insecure. They feel like they need to fill the silence, or prove their point, or convince you. But when you speak clearly and concisely, you communicate something powerful: confidence. You're telling the other person, "I trust you to understand this without a monologue. I trust that what I'm saying is strong enough to stand on its own." That trust is contagious. It sets the tone for mutual respect. It opens space for dialogue instead of monologue. Now, brevity doesn't mean being cold or abrupt. You're not a robot. You're a human being. It's okay to share stories, to express emotion, to go off script once in a while. But every time you speak, ask yourself, is this helping the conversation, or just extending it? Here's a little trick I use. Aim to leave people wanting more. If someone asks how your day was, you don't need to list every task you completed. Just give them one detail that's meaningful. Busy, but I had a great coffee with a friend I hadn't seen in years. That's interesting. That invites curiosity. It gives them a foothold if they want to dig deeper, but doesn't demand it. This is especially important in professional settings. Meetings, interviews, pitches. If you can articulate your point in 30 seconds instead of 3 minutes, people will remember you. Not because you said more, but because you said it better. Think of great speakers, great storytellers, great communicators. They don't ramble. They don't overwhelm. They deliver value. Then they stop. That's what brevity looks like. And here's the deeper point. When you speak less, you listen more. You notice more. You create more space for others to participate. And suddenly the conversation becomes shared, not just something you're directing. Let's tie all of this together. You've now heard all 10 rules. To recap quickly. Be present. No multitasking, no distractions. Show up fully. Don't pontificate. Enter every conversation assuming you have something to learn. Use open-ended questions. Invite stories, not just answers. Go with the flow. Let go of your own script. Follow what's being shared. If you don't know, say you don't know. Honesty is always better than guessing. Don't equate your experience with theirs. This is not about you. Don't repeat yourself. Clarity matters more than volume. Stay out of the weeds. Focus on what matters. Skip the trivia. Listen. Really listen. Not to reply, but to understand. Be brief. Respect the listener's time. Say what matters, then stop. Even if you take just one of these rules and commit to it, your conversations will get better. If you practice all 10, you'll be someone people want to talk to, someone people remember. Because here's the truth that ties this all together. Every person you meet has something amazing inside them. Something hidden. Something unique. A story, an idea, a perspective that only they can offer. Your job in every conversation is to help them bring it out. You don't need to impress. You don't need to dominate. You just need to show up and listen. I grew up with a grandmother who had a remarkable gift for conversation. She never talked the most. She never tried to be the center of attention. But people loved speaking with her. They'd leave feeling seen, heard, valued. After they left, my mom would turn to us and quietly say, "You know who that was?" She used to be a Broadway dancer. He was a civil rights attorney. She wrote a book on jazz. We had no idea. Because these people didn't lead with their accomplishments. They just talked. Openly. Humanly. And someone listened. That's what conversation can be. A place where people surprise you. A place where people trust you. A place where you discover instead of just perform. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you talk to someone, really talk. Try using these rules. Pick just one to start with. Maybe you work on being present. Or asking better questions. Or simply saying less. You don't need to master all of this overnight. Communication is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice. But the rewards? They're massive. Better conversations mean better relationships. Better teams. Better communities. Better lives. And in a world where division, distraction, and disconnection are the norm, you can be the difference. You can be the person who listens. Who cares. Who makes others feel understood. That's rare. That's powerful. And it starts with a choice. So choose better conversations. Choose connection. Choose to listen, and be amazed. By now you've got the rules. You've got the mindset. But let's bring this home by exploring what these conversations actually look like in practice. When you take these 10 principles and move them out of theory and into your real life. Because it's one thing to understand these ideas intellectually. It's another thing entirely to apply them when emotions run high, when someone disagrees with you, or when the topic is messy and uncomfortable. That's where the real test begins. Let's start with a scenario that almost everyone has faced. A conversation with someone you deeply disagree with. Maybe it's political. Maybe it's about parenting. Maybe it's even about something that strikes at the core of your identity. You brace yourself for the confrontation. You anticipate the arguments. And often you prepare your defense before the other person even finishes their first sentence. Now pause. What would happen if instead of defending, you listened? Not passively. Not waiting for your turn to speak. But truly listened, with curiosity and without interruption. Try this. Respond with, "Tell me more about that," or, "I'm curious how you came to believe that." Not to trap them. Not to launch a rebuttal. But to understand. What happens next can be surprising. Because when people feel heard, they relax. They shift from defensive to open. They may not change their mind, but you'll see the walls come down. And often they'll ask you to share your perspective in return. That's a real conversation. A mutual exchange. Now contrast that with what usually happens. You talk past each other. You cite studies, they counter with anecdotes. You raise your voice, they raise theirs. And by the end, nothing changes, except maybe your blood pressure. But if you apply these rules, especially the big 3, don't pontificate, ask open questions, and listen to understand, you can talk to almost anyone about anything without it blowing up. Let me give you a real example. I once spoke with a man who held deeply different political views from mine. Opposite ends of But let's be honest, it takes work. These habits don't come naturally. Most of us have spent years, even decades, communicating in reactive ways. Cutting people off. Making it about us. Filling silence out of fear. So if you try this and stumble, that's okay. You're rewiring your instincts. You're unlearning bad habits. And you're replacing them with something better. Intention. That's the core of all of this. Intentional conversation. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to show up with the goal of connection. Not performance. Not persuasion. Not control. Just connection. And once you start doing that, something wild happens. People respond. They relax. They open up. They listen back. Suddenly, conversations that used to drain you become energizing. Relationships that felt stagnant start moving again. And you begin to realize that the power to change the dynamic was always in your hands. It's not about having the perfect words. It's about having the right mindset. Presence over performance. Curiosity over control. Listening over lecturing. In the next section, we'll talk about what happens when you bring these skills into your work, how they transform teams, unlock collaboration, and make you the person everyone wants in the room. So far, we've focused on everyday conversations, family, friends, even strangers. But what happens when we bring these principles into the workplace? Into boardrooms, team huddles, job interviews, client meetings? This is where intentional conversation becomes a true superpower. In any professional setting, communication isn't just about exchanging information. It's about alignment, trust, progress. And if you've ever sat through a meeting that went in circles, or left a one-on-one more confused than when you walked in, you already know how damaging poor communication can be. Now, let's take the 10 rules we've been talking about and drop them right into the center of a typical workplace interaction. Say, a project meeting. Most people show up with a goal, get their point across, impress the boss, or survive the hour without being put on the spot. That's the baseline. But what if you showed up differently? What if you walked in fully present, not checking your phone under the table, not mentally drafting an email, but actually listening? You'd immediately stand out. What if instead of waiting for your turn to speak, you asked a well-placed, open-ended question like, how does that impact the timeline from your side? Or, what challenges do you see with this approach? You'd elevate the conversation. What if you avoided rambling, stuck to the essentials, and responded with clarity instead of corporate fluff? You'd gain instant credibility. And what if, when someone disagreed with you, instead of bracing for a fight, you responded with, that's an interesting point. Can you walk me through how you got there? You'd shift the entire tone of the room. Suddenly, you're not just another person in the meeting, you're the person who gets it. The person who listens. The person who keeps things moving forward without steamrolling anyone. That's leadership. And it has nothing to do with your title. The best leaders aren't always the loudest or the most charismatic. They're the ones who make other people feel heard. Who ask better questions. Who create space for solutions to emerge organically, not forcefully. Let's go deeper. Imagine you're giving a performance review. High stakes. The person across from you might be anxious, defensive, or already checked out. Start with presence. Make eye contact. Close the laptop. Put the phone away. Let them know this moment matters. Then ask, how do you feel about your performance over the past quarter? Don't lead with a grade. Don't lecture. Invite their perspective first. Listen. Really listen. Take notes. Ask clarifying questions. Can you tell me more about what made that project difficult? What would you have done differently if you had more support? When it's your turn to share feedback, be brief and clear. One thing you did really well was taking initiative during that product rollout. What I'd love to see more of is proactive communication with the team earlier in the process. No vague generalities. No 5-minute monologues. Just honest, actionable insight. And always end with openness. What support do you need from me moving forward? That's a conversation that leads to growth. Now flip the script. Imagine you're the one receiving feedback. Everything in your body wants to defend, explain, justify. You want to say, but what really happened was, or, they didn't tell me that. Instead you pause. You ask, can you give me an example? Or, what would a better approach have looked like in that situation? You show you're curious, not combative. You don't fake agreement, but you listen. And if you need time to process, say so. Thanks for sharing that. I want to reflect and come back with some thoughts tomorrow. That's maturity. That's professionalism. And that's rare. These principles don't just improve your communication, they elevate your reputation. You become known as the person who listens more than they talk. Who doesn't dominate meetings but drives them forward. Who doesn't need to be the smartest person in the room to be the most effective person in the room. Even in interviews, one of the most high-pressure communication scenarios, these rules give you an edge. Most candidates go in trying to say the right thing. They over-prepare answers, repeat buzzwords, and talk too much. Instead, show up ready to connect. Be present. Listen deeply to the questions. Ask thoughtful ones of your own. Don't try to cram every skill you have into one response. Choose one strong example, tell the story briefly, and let it speak for itself. If you don't know the answer to a technical question, say, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd love to look into it and follow up. That alone can make you stand out more than a textbook perfect answer. And in team settings, these rules are your secret weapon for collaboration. You'll navigate tension with grace. You'll handle feedback without defensiveness. You'll turn miscommunication into clarity. You'll get credit, not for being loud but for being effective. And over time, people will start seeking you out, not just because you deliver but because you make communication easier, clearer, calmer. That's influence. That's power. And it doesn't come from dominating the conversation, it comes from mastering it. In the next section we'll talk about something even deeper: how better conversations can heal, how they rebuild relationships, how they restore trust, and how they remind us, especially in moments of division, that we're still connected by something profoundly human. Now let's shift into the heart of what this is all about. Yes, better conversations help at work. They make you a stronger communicator, a more trusted collaborator, a better leader. But there's something deeper, something more human. Because beneath every tip, every rule, every technique, what we're really talking about is connection. Conversation at its best isn't just about sharing information, it's about building trust, healing wounds, rebuilding bridges that have been burned by silence, anger, or misunderstanding. You've probably felt this before. A moment when a conversation changed the temperature of the spectrum. Everything in me wanted to correct him, to challenge him, to shut him down. But I didn't. I asked questions. I let him talk. I really listened. And something unexpected happened. I started to see him. Not just his opinions, but his story. Where he came from. What he'd experienced. And while I didn't agree with his conclusions, I understood his reasons. And that changed everything. We didn't walk away in agreement. But we walked away in respect. And we kept talking. Now apply this to other parts of life. Your workplace, your relationships, even quick chats with strangers. When you start seeing every conversation as an opportunity to discover, instead of to declare, your whole world opens up. You'll notice things you never noticed before. That colleague who never speaks up in meetings? Ask them what they think, then shut up and let them talk. You might be shocked at the insight they bring. That friend who always dominates the group chat? Instead of tuning out, ask them a question that makes them reflect. Watch how the dynamic shifts. Even with your own family, your partner, your kids, try really listening. Not solving. Not fixing. Not even advising. Just listening. It can be transformational. In fact, some of the most powerful moments in my life came not from saying something brilliant, but from saying nothing at all. Just holding space. Just being present. Just listening. You don't need to be a therapist to do this. You don't need training. You just need to care. That's the secret ingredient behind all of these rules: genuine interest in the other person. Not as a project. Not as a performance. But as a human being worth knowing. And that brings us to a tough truth: most people are not used to being listened to. They go through their day unnoticed. Their stories go untold. Their pain goes unheard. So when someone really listens, it shocks them. In the best way. You become memorable. Not because of what you said, but because of what they felt in your presence. Seen, safe, and significant. There's a kind of dignity in that. A kind of quiet power. And in today's world, where everyone's shouting, where opinions are currency, and where silence is often mistaken for weakness, that power is rare. It's also needed. Desperately. We live in a time when communication has never been easier, yet connection has never felt harder. We're drowning in content. Drowning in noise. And yet people are starving for depth. For dialogue. For real, human moments. That's what these 10 rules give you, not just better conversations, but better connection. And when that connection becomes a habit, everything changes. Your relationships deepen. Your team communicates better. Your confidence grows. And your world becomes more open, more curious, more alive. Now imagine a world where this was normal. Where conversations weren't battles to win, but journeys to explore. Where differences didn't divide us, but invited us to learn. Where listening wasn't rare, it was expected. That world starts with you. It starts with the conversations you choose to have. With how you show up. With how you listen. So don't wait for someone else to start. Be the person who listens. Be the person who asks the better question. Be the person who says, "I don't know," and means it. Because that kind of person? They're unforgettable. And the impact they leave behind is deeper than any monologue, louder than any rant, and stronger than any argument. Let's take a closer look at how these rules work not just individually, but together. Because the real magic doesn't happen when you memorize a checklist, it happens when these principles start flowing as instinct. When your default mode becomes presence, curiosity, humility, and empathy. Let's take a real-world example, an ordinary, everyday conversation that most people treat as transactional: ordering coffee. Seems simple enough. You walk up to the counter, say what you want, pay, move on. But now imagine applying just 3 of the rules: be present, ask an open-ended question, and be brief. You make eye contact. You smile, not mechanically, but genuinely. You ask the barista, "How's your day going so far?" Not "How are you?" That question triggers autopilot. "How's your day going so far?" makes them think. They pause. They answer. Maybe it's a quick "not bad." Maybe they share something real. Either way, you've just created a moment. A break in the routine. A sliver of connection. And all it took was presence, curiosity, and brevity. These small interactions matter. They build muscle. They train you to show up in conversations of all kinds, from the mundane to the meaningful, with intention. But what about harder conversations? Let's talk about conflict. Most people avoid it. Or they bulldoze through it. Either way, the result is usually the same: damage. Now imagine approaching conflict with these rules in mind. You're frustrated with someone. You need to bring something up. What do? First, you stay present. No distractions. No multitasking. This tells the other person, you matter. Second, you don't come in with a speech. You don't rehearse your lines like a courtroom prosecutor. Instead, you enter the conversation ready to learn. Maybe you miss something. Maybe their perspective will change yours. Third, you lead with curiosity. Can you help me understand what happened from your side? It's disarming. It's respectful. It opens the door instead of slamming it. And most importantly, you listen, really listen. You don't wait to fire back. You don't prepare your defense mid-sentence. You hear them out. Fully. Then, when it's your turn, you speak clearly and briefly. No repetition. No rambling. Just what needs to be said. Do you see how all 10 rules start blending here? You're not repeating yourself. You're not equating your experience with theirs. You're staying out of the weeds. You're being honest if you don't know something. And you're always choosing clarity over complexity. That's what turns conflict into collaboration. Not fake politeness. Not passive aggression. But skilled, intentional communication. Let's apply this to something even more personal: family. Family conversations are often where our worst habits show up. We interrupt. We monologue. We assume. We bring years of baggage into a 2-minute exchange. And even when we mean well, we end up alienating the people we care about the most. But it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine this: your teenage son comes home, clearly upset. You want to fix it. You want to give advice. You want to launch into a story about when you were his age. But instead, you stop. You sit. You listen. You ask, "Want to talk about it?" Not with pressure. Not with expectation. Just openness. Maybe he shrugs. Maybe he talks. Either way, you're present. You're not checking your phone. You're not rushing. You're there. And if he does talk, you don't jump in with your own story. You don't hijack the moment. You let him lead. You ask follow-ups. How did that make you feel? What do you think you'll do next? And when it's time to say something, you keep it short. Simple. Honest. That sounds really tough. I'm here for you. No advice. No lecture. Just connection. That's a conversation he'll remember. And it might not look like much on the surface, but underneath, it's building trust. One word at a time. You can do this with anyone. Friends. Co-workers. Even strangers. A relationship. When something long buried was finally said, and the air shifted. When years of distance suddenly collapsed in a few honest minutes. That's the kind of power real conversation holds. And it's exactly what we're losing in this hyper-distracted, hyper-polarized world. You see, most of the people we avoid aren't villains. They're not malicious. They're not trying to hurt us. They're just distant. We've drifted. We stopped talking. Or we talked but never really listened. And now the relationship feels thin. Fragile. Like it could break under the weight of one honest sentence. So we avoid. We change the subject. We keep it surface level. Safer that way. But deep down, we miss it. We miss the closeness. We miss the ease. We miss them. And it all comes back to conversation. I've seen this over and over again. Siblings who haven't spoken in years because of one fight that never got resolved. Parents and children who orbit each other like strangers. Friends who used to share everything but now can't even sit down for coffee without tension creeping in. And often what they need isn't therapy or intervention. They need one conversation. One moment of presence. One honest sentence. One person brave enough to listen without attacking, and speak without blaming. That's not easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things you ever do. But here's what happens when you try. You show the other person that you're not there to win. You're not there to punish. You're there to connect. That changes everything. It opens the door. They may not walk through it right away, but they'll remember that you opened it. And maybe, eventually they'll meet you halfway. I remember speaking to a woman who had a falling out with her father over politics. It had been years. They only talked at holidays, and even then it was strained. She missed him, but every conversation turned into a fight. Then one day she tried something new. She called him, and instead of jumping into a topic or rehashing the past, she simply said, "Dad, I don't want to argue anymore. I just want to know how you're really doing." And then she listened. No interruptions. No debate. No eye rolls or sighs or corrections. She just listened. And what followed wasn't perfect. It wasn't a movie ending. But it was honest. It was human. And it was a start. They've been rebuilding ever since. That's the power of presence. Of listening. Of asking open-ended questions with no trap at the end. That's what real communication can do, not just solve problems but restore people. You may not be in a dramatic rift like that, but I guarantee you, there's someone in your life right now who feels misunderstood, unheard, distant. And you have the power, not the obligation but the power, to change that with one conversation. Not with a speech. Not with an apology tour. Just by showing up with the right mindset. Curious, open, brief, present, and honest. Say something like, "I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I don't think I really listened. I miss how we used to talk. Can we try again? I know we see things differently, but I care about you." That hasn't changed. These are not weak statements. They are strong. They take courage. And they build trust. And trust, once built, makes every future conversation easier. This applies in romantic relationships too. So many couples drift not because of some huge betrayal, but because they stop talking, really talking. They fall into routines. They assume. They fill the silence with noise. Until one day they don't recognize each other anymore. But it doesn't have to be that way. Even a 5-minute daily check-in with presence and intention can make a massive difference. What's something that's been on your mind lately? Is there anything you need from me that I haven't been giving? How are you really feeling today? And then, listen. Without fixing. Without judgment. Without turning it into a mirror for your own frustrations. Do that and you'll build a relationship that can withstand anything. We're not born with these skills. We learn them. Often the hard way. Through mistakes. Through silence. Through pain. But we can relearn them too. And in doing so we become better friends. Better partners. Better parents. Better teammates. Better leaders. Better people. Because conversation is not just a skill. It's a practice, a choice, and sometimes, a lifeline. In the final section we'll bring it all together. We'll talk about the world we create when we commit to these principles, not just for ourselves but for everyone around us. So here we are, 10 sections in. 10 principles, countless real-world examples, and a single undeniable truth. Conversation matters. It's more than talk, more than words, more than the sounds we make with our mouths. It's how we connect, how we understand, how we grow. And when it's done right, conversation can shape the world around us. We started with a simple question. Why is it so hard to talk to people these days? And along the way we've uncovered answers. Real ones. Some uncomfortable. Some surprisingly simple. We're distracted. We're defensive. We're in love with our own opinions. We've been trained to argue, not to understand. To perform, not to connect. But the solution isn't out of reach. It's not theoretical. It's not hidden behind a paywall or locked in some advanced course. It's right here. In 10 rules. Practice daily. Let's run through them one last time, not as a checklist but as a new way to show up in the world. Be present. Put down the phone. Close the laptop. Look people in the eye. Let them know without saying a word that you're here and nowhere else. Don't pontificate. You don't need to be right. You don't need to dominate. Go into every conversation with one assumption. There's something here I can learn. Use open-ended questions. Skip the yes or no traps. Ask questions that invite stories. What happened? How did that feel? Why do you think that is? Go with the flow. Let go of your agenda. Let your thoughts come and go. Don't interrupt. Don't hijack. Stay in the current of the conversation. If you don't know, say so. There's no shame in not having the answer. There's wisdom in admitting it. Be honest. Be human. People respect that. Don't equate your experience with theirs. Someone sharing something vulnerable? Don't counter with your own story. This isn't about you. It never was. Don't repeat yourself. If your point was clear, once is enough. Repetition waters it down. Respect your listener. They heard you the first time. Stay out of the weeds. Skip the dates, the names, the irrelevant details. Focus on the heart, the moment, the why. That's where the meaning lives. Listen, not just with your ears, with your body, your mind, your heart. Listen to be changed, not just to respond. Be brief. Respect the clock. Respect attention spans. Leave them wanting more, not looking for an exit. These aren't just communication tactics. They're relationship tools, life skills, and maybe even moral commitments. Because let's face it, we live in a time of disconnection, of polarization, of noise, and conversation is how we rebuild the fabric. One moment at a time. One person at a time. One conversation at a time. Imagine a world where these 10 rules were common practice. Where every Uber driver, cashier, coworker, neighbor, and family member you interacted with showed up like this. Curious, humble, present, brief, kind. That world isn't some utopia. It's possible. And it starts with you. You don't have to change the world in one conversation. You just have to change one conversation. With a friend who feels unheard. With a colleague who's been overlooked. With a relative you've written off. With a stranger who just wants to feel seen. And even with yourself. Because let's not forget, the most important conversations you have aren't always out loud. They're the silent ones inside your own head. How do you talk to you? Do you listen? Do you repeat? Do you fill silence with clutter, or sit with it, and grow? When you practice these 10 principles with others, you're also reshaping the way you think, feel, and relate to the world inside. You become quieter, clearer, more open, more aware. You stop rushing to speak, and start learning to hear. You stop needing to be right, and start wanting to understand. And that transformation? It's bigger than any TED Talk. Bigger than any script. It's how culture changes. It's how movements start. With conversations. And here's the last thing I'll leave you with. Everyone has something extraordinary to say. But they won't say it if they don't feel safe. They won't share it if they think they'll be corrected, hijacked, ignored, or dismissed. They won't open up unless you show them, I'm listening. I'm here. I care. You have that power. And you don't need a microphone. You don't need a stage. All you need is a moment, and the will to be present in it. So take these 10 rules. Make them yours. Live them. Share them. Use them. Because conversation is not dying. It's evolving. And the future of how we speak, and how we listen, starts now. If this resonated with you, take a moment to share it. Send it to someone you've been meaning to talk to. Someone you want to reconnect with. Someone who deserves to be heard. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is here to help you speak better, listen deeper, and live more connected than ever before. Thank you for being here. Now go talk to someone. And don't forget to listen.